Good evening, everyone.
Kavod Haraf, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank you.
Kavod Haraf, we were left on the Bet Yosef on the Yud Aleph, Yud Gimel, I think.
Okay,
And we were left on Rabenu Yeruham, I think it is.
okay. All right, very good. Yeah, okay. So it says here, Katru Rabbeinu Yerucham, says this rabbi, well, he also wrote this, in other words, he's saying. So what does that mean? That above that, right, he says, but that, the Perek Bet Chulin, you should know, it says in the second Perek of Chulin, Lamed Aleph Amud Bet, Aminan Taval Velo Chzak Mutar, right, Lechulin. Right, so it says there that if he immersed, he's allowed to eat mundane foods. There's Rashi. What does that mean? Eat kaven, right? Okay, yeah, I get it. So he's saying like this, right? That if he immersed in the mikveh, but he didn't have intention to do so, he just like jumped in there, whatever, fell in. So it wasn't his intention, but still, he's considered to be pure to eat mundane foods. So in other words, what we're saying is he doesn't need to have intention for the mikvah. Just the fact that he went in is enough. And that, by the way, applies also to other things. Like a person, let's say, if a woman went into the mikvah and she didn't have the intention or purifying herself. So there also we say, that as long as she went in and she did the job, it works anyway. Whatever it is, it is. She doesn't require intention for that. And same thing with the convert, right? When the convert converts, she doesn't really require intention for the mikveh. She just goes, whatever was the purpose that she went in there, as long as it was done properly, it's all good. So same thing over here. Mm. Okay, that's good. So then he goes on, Perek Bet Chagiga. Right, also the second perk of Chagiga, Yud Chit Amud Bet, Nami Grasinan, it says there, Tan Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Hanotel Yadav Nitkaven Yadav Teorot, right? So, Lo Nitkaven Yadav Teorot. So it says over there that if he washed his hands, right? If he had intention, what does that mean? He had intention to purify his hands, so then it works. Otherwise, it doesn't work. That's what it says there. Uh, Same thing also, he says if he, immerses his hands, right, into a mikveh, whatever, right? If he had intention, it works. Didn't have intention, doesn't work, right? But then Gemara asks on that. But then we learned that he doesn't need intention for that. So now all of a sudden you're telling me he needs intention? Contradiction, right? So Amar Rav Nachman lo kashya kan maaser kan truma. So Rav Nachman answers, yeah, one is talking about maaser, right, and one is talking about truma. So according to this, he says, אם תוספתא דבסמוך בחולין הוא צריך לומר דהא כדקתניא תנא כמה נוטל מתכוון לאו דווקא כשהוא הדין אפילו לא נתכוון ולא נתן ולא מקבל נמי ידיו טהורות. Right, so we see from here that when it comes to mundane foods, he doesn't require intention or whatever. It works even without that. But when it comes to truma, which is holy food, so there it does require intention. Okay. But today, we don't have these holy foods, so we're all eating mundane stuff. Okay, let's go on. It goes on, דהוא הדין אפילו לא נתכוון, ולא נותן, ולא מקבל נמי ידיו טהורות, ודהה משמע דהה דמחשר פרק ב' חגיגה בנוטל ידיו או מטבילין או מטבילן, והוא בעצמו הוא, כשלא נתכוון, הרי אין שם כוונה כלל, והוא הדין נוטל ידיו על ידי אחר, ולא נתכוון שום אחד מהם, right, אלא להשמינן. So also he says the same thing also works if somebody poured, water on you, right, on your hands, and neither you or him had any intention for purification, right? Nevertheless, it works anyway. So, in other words, these kinds of things don't really require intention, which we call in Hebrew kavanah, right? Kavanah doesn't require kavanah. Okay. אלא להשמינן כוחות דרבי מאיר יוסף אפילו מתכוון אחד פסל נקט פליגתיו מתכוון אחד מהם אלא אבל אם אינה מהכי אינה חינמית דלתנא קמא אפילו לא נתכוון אחד מהם נמי כשר. לכן נראה שהוא דעת כל הפוסקים שלא הצריכו כוונת כלל. Right, so he says, right, that the poskim hold that you don't really require any intention, right? Whether it's the guy who pours the water or the guy who receives the water, it doesn't matter who it is. For either one. Okay, interesting. But the Rashba says, so he says, he seems to disagree with this, right? He says that you do require, intention here. If you're interested in eating, right, a meal, you do require intention. Because it says in Tosefta, he says, "Hanotel mitkaven v'noten eno mitkaven." ידיו טהורות, ורבי יוסף אומר ידיו טמאות, עלמא אף לרבנן כוונת נוטל או כוונת נותן בעינן. So we learn from the Tosefta, the Rashba, that we do require that at least one of them should have intention, right? Whether it's the guy who pours the water or the guy who, right, is washing his hands, one or the other. The Academy Mashma Mediamar Rav, it's also, it comes out from the statement of Rav in Chulin Kuf Vav Amud Bet. Notel Adam Yadav, right? It says there that a person can wash his hands. Shachrit matnei alehem. Right, this is like something we learned before, but I think we're gonna cover it soon. Again, right, in the place where it's supposed to be. So anyway, right, it's an interesting thing. Gemara says that Rav says like this, right? A person can wake up in the morning, okay? He washes his hands, and his intention, right, is like this, that he's going to use this washing for all day. What does that mean? That if he wants to eat, whatever, or later on, he wants to have some breakfast, whatever it is, right, lunch, he's going to use this washing for all day. There is such a concept like this. It's brought down the Shulchan Aruch also. We're going to see that. But anyway, right? How does this work? It works because what he's doing is right. He's making a stipulation. He's saying, you know what? Like I'm going to guard my hands, make sure they don't get anything impure on my hands, and this way I'm going to use this washing for the whole day. Now the thing is, if he has to go to the bathroom, obviously, right, it's not going to work anymore. So that's the thing, right? So that's gonna eliminate it, and obviously, But if he doesn't have to use the bathroom, right, as long as he can go without using the bathroom, he can use that washing, right? Because he stipulated that he's going to guard the hands and keep them clean. Good luck, right? Trying to go all day without using the bathroom. For most of us, that doesn't work like that. I don't know. I don't know how they did it in those days, but not exactly sure what they did there. But right, once you go into the bathroom, you're gonna have to wash your hands, right? Obviously. So okay, whatever. So this is like an interesting concept, right? That he's gonna guard his hands all day, and that washing in the morning will take him through the whole day. In theory, right? Theoretically. Today, right? Nobody does this really. Why is that? Because we're not so careful to guard our hands, all day. So we're not really on that level, to be so conscientious about cleanliness. And as we said, also we're using the bathroom a lot. We're going to the bathroom every couple of hours, whatever. So how are you gonna guard your hands like that? But the thing is, that if you need this, in like a pressing situation where you're not going to have water later on, so you want to rely on the washing in the morning, that's a good idea, to do like that. If right later on the conditions are going to change, there's not going to be any water to wash with, right? Things like that. So then, you should try to do it this way. This way, if as far as you can go without using the bathroom, you have your hands clean, right? This way, if you want to have a meal, right, you won't have to wash your hands because you already did so in the morning. This may be a good idea, for somebody's like, let's say, going on a plane, So, it's hard to wash your hands on the plane because, like you have to get up and bother everybody. And there's people, walking around. And also, you have to go into the bathroom to wash your hands and all kinds of strange stuff going on there, right? I mean, so it's not so easy to wash your hands there. So if you're planning to have bread on the plane, uh, so then, right, that would be a nice idea, Wash your hands and say, you know what? This is going to go with me like the whole flight. As long as you don't use the bathroom, right? It'll go with you. Yeah, whatever, right? So, okay. There's always a dilemma, on on the plane, like how to handle this. Like how do I wash my hands? What do I do? I'm bothering people. I don't want to get them up. They're sitting. It's all kinds of things, all kinds of considerations going on there.
You just not eat bread?
Yeah, I mean that's fine. You can do that too. Yes. So just some people. What happens is that they bring the meal, and it has like a little roll, right? Little bun. You get that little bun there, right? So you want to have that bun, so it'll keep you going the whole flight, whatever. So you know. Also, a lot of people, what they do, on the plane is that some people make mezonot on that bun, on that roll, whatever that they give you. And there are some rabbis who say you can make mezonot on that. Because it's like it's not regular bread, they make it like specially I'm talking about the kosher stuff, right? When they give you like a kosher meal, usually the bread is like it's made with like fruit juice or something, so this way you can avoid having to, wash with your hands and stuff. But a lot of rabbis say, this is no good because it's made to be a meal, so how can you eat without washing your hands? It's not really made to be a snack. So, there's like a machloket about that, just like everything else. So, I personally, don't make mezonot on those things, on those buns on the flight, I don't do that. Yeah, some people will do it, so each one has his own right. The rabbi, he asks them what to do, whatever. I personally try to, avoid that because, I'm having a meal after all, so why should I make mezonot, like just doesn't seem right according to the halacha. We're going to talk about these things, by the way. We're going to elaborate more on these issues when we get into the laws of brachot, the laws of blessings, and a lot to talk about this. Lots to talk about. Anyway, right? So that's the way it goes, So as we said, right, you can do this like get up in the morning and make a condition, that you're gonna guard your hands all day. Right? So we're talking about you're guarding your hands. In other words, you're consciously guarding them from getting right impure. Okay, the Perish Rashi, like Rashi explains the Rambam, also Rambam. But it says that's only if you stipulated this, you have to make a stipulation. But if you did not, you just wash your hands in the morning without stipulating this, so then it doesn't work. That's what he's saying over here. Okay, anyway, let's go on. So he says, so he says, right, what do you see from there? The fact that you have to stipulate, like, I'm not coming up by now. That means we require intention, he says, right? You see from there. So, but he says, if one of them had intention, whether it's the one who's spilling the water, right, pouring the water, or the other one who's receiving the water, it's good. Okay, interesting. Let's go on. Right, so Rabbi Yosef so it says we go like the first opinion. It says not like Rabbi Yosef. The Rabbi Minu. Why? Because they're the majority, he says. Right? Who's saying this? The Rashba. And so he's arguing with what we said, in the name of the other rabbis that we mentioned, that they're going like Rabbi Yosef. The Ikasha Haditnan Masechet Machshirin. So if you're going to ask me, what about what it says over there in Tractate Machshirin? Omay Tela Beperek also brings it in Perek Shochet over there in Churin. So it says there that fruit that fell into the some kind of a vessel of water, right? Pashat me'adav temeot. Natlan yadav teorot. Perot teorim. V'dakinan mina hatam delo by kavana lechulin. Nireli. So in other words, he brings this Gemara and says we see from there in this Gemara that we don't require intention for mundane foods. So if you're going to ask me, but didn't you just tell me we do require intention? So what about this Gemara? So the Rashba has an answer for that, right? Let's see what the answer is. So he says, so I don't think that's talking about eating mundane foods. It's talking about touching mundane foods. Not the same thing. Oh. So what does that mean? That if it was made, right, on the terms of purity, to touch them. It's talking about that. But he says when it comes to eating mundane foods, we do require intention. He says the Rashba, the Ta'ama, the Mishum Serech Teruma. So he says it's the same thing. The reasoning, right, is because of the truma, right? You may come to eat truma. Tzricha kavana ksat b'truma. So it's, therefore they required itzrichuha kavana ksat b'truma. They required some intention like truma. Kach nireh li. That's the way it seems to me. He says. That's the end of it. So even though it says I proved from the second parak of Chagiga, the lo baya kavana klal, that you don't really. So now the Bet Yosef is saying this, right? That you don't really require intention at all. אפשר דלא ניחא לפרושי ננקת תוספתא דמתכוון אחד דשמינן כוחות דרבי יוסף דעד רבא הבה למינקת ולא נתכוון. So he says it's possible, right, that the Rashba doesn't see that Gemara that way, the way that I saw it, he says, right? ולא נתכוון, אחד מהם דשמינן, ואפילו לאחי כמחשר, דתנא קמא ובדרכוך דהתרא הבה עדיף להשמינן, בעוד להשמינן דרבותא ריבא דתנא קמא דקיימא לן כבתי, הבה עדיף ואילקח ודאי לא מחשר תנא קמא אלא מתכוון. So, in other words, he says, right, bottom line, from that Gemara, we see that the first opinion over there, right, only allows you when you have intention. Echad mehem, at least one of them. Dafka behad the Tanya says that which we learned right in the Braita, Pek Bet Chagiga, for second Pek of Chagiga, Ben Itkaben, Ben Utkaben, whether he has intention or not. Yadav Terot, his hands are pure anyway. Haino Ben Otel or Matbil Yadav Alide Acher. He says that's when you're washing or dipping your hands by way of somebody else. Ve'echad mehem nitkaben, and one of them has intention. Vechavero lo nitkaben. And the other one does not have intention. But im lo nitkaben shum echad mehem, but he says if nobody had intention, not one the other, right? Pasul, then it's no good. It doesn't work out. V'chen keshu atzmo notel yadav. So it's also the same thing where he himself, right, washes his hands. O matbil otan, or he immerses his hands. He has to have intention for that. So, in other words, the Bet Yosef is trying to reconcile the words of the Rashba, to see how they plug in and fit in, right, into the whole context. So he's going out of his way here, try to explain the words of the Rashba, because he respects him a lot, so he's trying to, he's not just dismissing his words, it's nothing, it's okay, we're good. No, it doesn't go. He takes it with a lot of seriousness, his words. So therefore, he's trying to explain and justify them. Interesting. Wow. Okay. So he goes on. This is what says Shibul Leket. Hamatbil yadav ben itkaven b'shul lo itkaven yatsa b'ma devarim memorim lechulin. So, but Shibul Leket says the opposite, right, of the Rashba, that it does work, even without intention, right? As long as it's mundane food. When it comes to truma, echad notel ve'echad matbil, im itkaven yatsa ve'im lav lo yatsa. When it comes to truma, you need intention. Ketav Rabbeinu Binyamin, right, says this is Rabbi. Notel yadav, if he washes his hands, let's say, right, he washed his hands to eat, and then his friends called him, they called him, they said, you know what, can you come outside to the street for a second? We want to speak with you, right? So he goes out there, and for like a little while, he just kind of divert his attention to something else, All time, right? It says like an hour or two. Interesting, right? So what happens over there? Does that washing now still, is that still in effect, or is it already nullified because you lost your trend of thought and you went to something else? Interesting question. So now he comes back to eat, right? Does he have to wash his hands again? He just went to, talk with his friends for a while. An hour or two. It must have been a long conversation, right? I hope they're not talking about politics. So anyway, right? Otherwise they're going to start fighting. So right, so then, so he says right that you have to wash your hands again. That's what he says, and he brings a gemara for this. Yoma lamed aleph, diber im chavero ve'flig. Right, if he spoke with his friend and then he went out somewhere else, right? He has to wash his hands again. This doesn't resemble the case where it says so he says it doesn't resemble the case where Rab said, yeah, you can wash your hands in the morning, and go all day, with that, right, with that washing. It doesn't resemble that case. Why is that? Because there he says his intention was like that. In other words, he's going to go and do other stuff, right? But he's going to guard his hands, So he stipulated that. That's what makes it work. Otherwise, if you don't have that stipulation, it doesn't work, this kind of thing, So if you already went into a different, mode, and you came back an hour or two later, so you got to wash your hands again, right? Who knows what you did at that time, right? All that time. Maybe, you put your hands in inside your chest, right? You had an itch right over there. Your right, your stomach was itching, so you put it inside there to scratch it. Who knows what you did? So that's why, or let's say, maybe you had an itch on your scalp, and you scratched your scalp. So that means now your hands are not clean anymore. Right? Or let's say you touched your shoes, right? Something like that, right? Same, all these things, right? Kind of things. So you're gonna have to wash again. We're concerned that you did one of these things, while you were hanging around with your friends, right, in the street over there. Okay, so that's the story. Interesting. Let's go on. Right, so it says, okay, well, we explained it. That's good. So in other words, we know that we saw now several opinions here, right? We saw most of the rabbis seem to be lenient here, regarding this, that you don't require intention. But we saw the Rashba, right, who was very, stringent, he was very vehement to try to say that you need intention. So then how do we paskin, right? The halacha. Look what he says, right? Even though the poskim didn't really require, intention, right? As we said, most of them did not. Whether it's the guy who pours the water or the guy who receives it. What he says, right? He says, nevertheless, since these poskim never said explicitly, right, that you don't require intention, they never said that. They never said you do, and they never said you don't. So he says, Rashba. This is therefore, so we go like the Rashba. Wow, look at that, right? He found a way to get into the Rashba here. Very nice. Very impressive. Okay, very, very good. All right. You can see, by the way, from here, how much respect he has for the Rashba, One guy just like overturned, like several people here. I mean, in a sense, right? You have to understand how that works, but how do we go here according to the minority opinion, the Rashba? So the answer is we don't do that. We don't go one guy against everybody. We don't paskin like that. But here we do. Why? Because he says, the other ones never really said explicitly the opposite. They just didn't explicitly say like the Rashba either. So they're like parv, not dairy, not meat, right? But the Rashba is all the way, on the other side, right? So therefore, he overturns the whole thing. Incredible. Okay, there you go. That's why, in the old days, when they wanted to say, some rabbi was like a really big chacham, he was a big rabbi, you know what they would say, right? He's like the Rashba. Why is that? Because the Rashba is considered to be like the biggest brain, the brainchild, whatever you want to call it. A tremendous scholar, So therefore, if they want to say somebody's really, really good, they say, oh, he's like the Rashba. Oh, that's the biggest praise you can give somebody. Right? That's what the Rav Chaim Nivolozhin, the Talmud of the Gra, he said about the Gra. He said he's like the Rashba. Oh, if you say that, oh my God, By the way, that's a common thing, like amongst the Ashkenazim, when you go to the yeshivot of the Ashkenazim, they tell you there, like the Gra was like, one of the Rishonim, even though he wasn't Rishon, he wasn't in that from that period. He was only like 250 years ago, but 300 years ago, right? Tops, right? So he wasn't from that period of the Rishonim. They say he was like the Rishonim, Why? You know who said that? Because his Talmud, right? Rabbi Chaim Volozhin. He said that about the Gra, He was like the Rashba, something like that, all kinds of stuff like that, right? So, but the truth is, practically speaking, we don't consider him to be a Rishon. A lot of people make this mistake. They say, well, yeah, he's like the Rishonim. He can argue with the Rishonim. Not exactly. He's not on that level to argue with the Rishonim. You know what I mean? Let's not get carried away. So the truth is, we look at the Gra as an Achron, not as a Rishon in Halakha. We don't go that far. A little bit far fetched, Right? So therefore, we always go like the Rishonim. We give them more weight than the Achronim. That's the way it is. One time, the Chazon Ish, who was like from the last generation, he passed away like after World War II. He was like he was a big rabbi in Israel, and Bnei Brak before, before our time a little bit, before we were born, whatever. So, right. So the Chazon Ish, they asked him about this one time, They asked him. They said, so what about Rav Chaim Volozhin? He said the Gra was like a Rishon. He says, do you agree with that? In other words, does he have the weight of a Rishon when it comes to halakha? So Chazon Ish said, no. He says, that's not what it means. Right? So then what does it mean? That's the question, right? So he says he was like a Rishon when it comes to his knowledge, but not in terms of his judgment. He says the knowledge he had like the Rishonim. In other words, he knew everything, from top to bottom. But his judgment was not on the level of Rishonim. That's what the Chazon Ish said. Good point, whatever. It is what it is. So also, they asked one time Moshe Feinstein, they said if there's a machloket between the I'm sorry, there's a siren going on here. Let the siren pass by. We'll let them put the fire out, so that nothing gets burned down over here. So anyway, right, as we said, right, they asked Moshe Feinstein one time. They said, if there's a machloket between the Ramah and the Gra, who do we go like, right? What's halakha, Because there are some Ashkenazim, as I said, right? They make the Gra into like some kind of they put him on a big pedestal when it comes to halakha, whatever. So Moshe Feinstein answered, he said, we pass like the Ramah over the Gra, he says. So he says, the Ramah is like a Mishnah, and he says the Gra is like a Braita. That's what he compared it to. So what does that mean? What's the pshat? The pshat is, that the Ramah is in the Shulchan Aruch. We accepted the rulings of the Ramah, the Ashkenazim, right? So therefore, right, they go like the Ramah. So even though the Gra argues sometimes with the Ramah, but the Ramah is a Mishnah. It was like so therefore the halakha is like the Ramah. That question comes up for the Ashkenazim, but we Sfaradim, we hold like Bet Yosef, Maran Bet Yosef, Shulchan Aruch, right? That's how we go, So we accepted the rulings of the Shulchan Aruch, of the Bet Yosef, right? Of the all the books of Maran, Bet Yosef, Shulchan Aruch, Kesef Mishneh, right? Bedek Habayit, Afkat Rochel, all these books, right? We accept all those rulings. So that's how we go. They said, the later authorities, they said even if 100 rabbis are arguing with Maran Bet Yosef, we go like the Bet Yosef anyway. Even if it's 100 arguing with him. So you see from there, right? We're very vehement with that. The Sfardim. We don't deviate from the Bet Yosef. We don't deviate from the Shulchan Aruch. That's the way it is. Okay, very good. You got the point. I digressed a little bit, but I thought, perhaps it was worth it, to understand these things, because they are important, these things, to understand. Okay, so anyway, right, getting back to what we said. Um, Interesting things he says here. He says like this, right? That mhm. So he brings here, right, something from Tosefta, something interesting. He says, "Shekol tameh sheim naga bo adam," if a person is impure, okay, and somebody touched him, person, right, Betzbah with his finger, touched him with his finger, yeh kol gufo tameh. So he says all his body becomes impure. Velo yadav bilvad. It's not only his hands, right? The whole body becomes impure. Dumia de met. So he says similar to like a dead person. The tameh met. So he says why? Because if a person who has the impurity of the dead, or let's say he had relations with a nida, which is a very big impurity. I know tuma deoraita, which is from the Torah, this impurity. Kasher ten yadayim. He still can wash somebody's hands though. Aval lo tameh kol tameh sheim nagabo adam. But he says if a person is impure, a person touched him, you yada bilvad tameot. But he says, right, so yeah, so if he touches with his hands, I'm sorry, if he touched him, only his hands will be impure. That's only for rabbinical tuma, rabbinical impurity. So when it comes to rabbinical impurity, like only his hands will become impure. But if it's impurity from the Torah, tuma from the Torah, so the whole body becomes impure. That's the difference. Interesting. Wow. Eno kasher, so there he says, right, you cannot now wash somebody's hands. Because he says they made this stronger, this decree of the rabbis. Because they decreed because of truma, as we said, right? So it says people who eat truma are very, they're very right, fastidious about these things. Mikol bakol, right? They're very careful. Mituma, to avoid any impurity. Deoraita from the Torah. So when it comes from the Torah, they're very careful to avoid any impurity like that. So therefore, the rabbis didn't need to strengthen that because people are very weary of it. But when it comes to rabbinical tuma, they're not so careful, so therefore the rabbis made it stronger. So therefore he says, right, bottom line, if somebody has rabbinical impurity, right, and notimi many of them, if we're not allowed to use him to wash our hands. In other words, he shouldn't pour the water on us. If somebody's rabbinically impure. So, by the way, this is the reason why in the morning when we wake up, there's a halacha like this, right? We learned this already, I think. If I'm not mistaken, yeah, we did. The rule is, when you wake up in the morning, right? Let's say, and you got to wash your hands. So, right, the rule is you're not allowed to wash your hands from somebody who hasn't washed his hands yet, right? Because he's impure himself, so he's not allowed to wash your hands. First, he's got to wash his own hands, and then when he's done with himself, now he can do you. Right? That's the way it is, It's exactly what we're saying here. Okay. So let's go on a little bit. Let's see how much we got here. Yeah, we're almost done. I guess we can finish it off. The Rosh katav beperet kama pasachet yadayim. So the Rosh says, right, that vayidna shekol amayim tameim. So it says nowadays, right, all the water is impure. Wow. Yachol litol. Therefore, he can wash. He says, "Mayim migoy." He can wash his hands from a goy, or min nida, or from a nida. The belav hachi kol mayim tameim. Says why? Because all the water is impure anyway. Wow, that's very interesting. I don't know why he says that the water is impure. I'm not exactly sure where he gets that from. But so there's no other way to do it. He says, so he says, right, that he holds like the Tosfot regarding this, that the Tosfot also holds the same way. Wow. So I don't know exactly what he means when he says that, all the water is impure. I don't know where he got this from. Anyway, let's go on. We got lots of sirens going on here. My God. Oof. 15 minutes already. Unbelievable. So much noise. So here, right, the manhig katav hakol ksherim liyadayim. So he says the manhig, right, everybody's kosher for washing hands, even from, right, the retard and the deaf mute and the child, lo mina goy, but he says not the goy, right? The bainan sheyavo mikoach adam. Says we need that it should come from the hands of from a man. Vehem einam krim adam. So he says they're not called Adam, right? There's a concept like this, The truth is, I don't think we pass in this way, but the manhig holds like this. We're going to see, right, in the halacha what it says. Orchot Chaim, right? Katab b'shem Rambam. Right, so he says the name of the Rambam, Orchot Chaim, that we also should, same thing, right? We shouldn't wash from a goy. When you so he says, but it seems like it's a mistake, In other words, it was copied over incorrectly, We don't find that the Rambam says this, You can't wash your hands from a goy. About samag betruma katu kedivya tosot, right? But the smag and truma like the tosot be'arosh and the rosh. The ben goy ben nida, whether it's a goy or nida. You can wash your hands from them. So in other words, it seems like the halacha is that you can wash your hands from a goy, and also from a nida. So let's say your wife is nida, right? She can still wash her hands. And, but there's an issue, when it's your wife, by the way, because when your wife is nida, she's not supposed to really, like bathe you, So it may be that we're talking about some other woman who's nida, not your wife. To keep that in mind. So in other words, it's better if it's a stranger. Now, you understand why it's better if it's a stranger? Why is she any better than your wife? You get my question? So the answer is because with your wife, the rabbis decreed, right, to stay away from her, during her nidah. You're not allowed to touch, you can't sleep in the same bed, you can't hand her anything over. So they made all kinds of, rules like this, but these rules do not apply to a stranger woman. Meaning what? You can hand over something to a strange woman, but to your wife you cannot. Right? So why are they more strict with your wife? Because with your wife, we're concerned that there's going to come to some intimacy. With a stranger, we're not concerned about that so much, because she's not allowed to you, right? She's not your wife. You can't really have her. So then, why would you want to, do something with her? So the rabbis only decreed with your wife these things, you cannot hand her something, But of course, when it comes to touching, you can't touch anybody. I mean, any woman you shouldn't touch. Doesn't matter who it is. Okay, so that's the story there. So he goes on here. So he says, Rash also paskins that way, it seems like. He's lenient about this, Torah bite. in the Chubot of the Ramban, right? The ones that are attributed to the Ramban, the Rashba attributed to the Ramban. Miyuchas Ramban. Okay, we're done with this. So we'll do Shulchan Aruch. We'll stop. I don't want to keep you here all night. Half the night is enough. So this one was, as you said, right? There was several here. Yeah, this is Yud Aleph, Yud Bet, Yud Gimel. There's 3 Shulchan Aruchs here. So we'll see if we can knock it off tonight. If not, right, we'll save some for tomorrow. We'll see what we can do. So tomorrow we'll be doing Yud Daled. Bezat Hashem, God willing. Okay, so I'll leave the marker here so we don't forget. So let's see Shulchan Aruch. So it says here, it's not the right one. Right, so it says here, "Hakol ksherim neten mayim yadayim." Anybody can pour water on you, right? Afilu chashu, right? So what does that mean? As we said, right, the deaf mute and the child and right, all these things, right, and also right, a goy, right, obed gilurim v'nida, also nida, right. So all these things they can do, even a nida. Okay. The only thing we have to check, by the way, is regarding, as we said, right, if it's your wife, if she can do this also. So, maybe we'll look at the Mishnah Brewer, what he says about that. Okay, so yeah, maybe we can look right now. Let's see what we can find there. Let's see Mishnah Brewer. Samach Tet. Okay, so right, so he explains at least one thing here, which I like, which is what we saw in the name of the Rosh, right, in the Bet Yosef, right. The Rosh said that all the water today is impure, right. So what do you mean by that? As I was like perplexed with what he means by that. So he explains here what it means is like this, since all of us, have the impurity of the dead, we're not able to cleanse ourselves from that. So therefore, right, if you pick up a cup of water, right, you have already, made it impure as it is. So that explains something important. Why? Because when it comes to a mikveh, so there, the water is really pure. So he's not talking about a mikveh here. He's talking about, a cup of water, basically. Some kind of a vessel that was picked up by a person, So there, I guess, we say that it's impure. But when it comes to a mikveh, the water is pure there. Because nothing can make the mikveh impure. It's as it is. It stands pure. Even if somebody goes in there, right, who's impure, it doesn't make the water impure, the mikveh. So we're not talking about that. That was my question. I didn't understand. how can the mikveh be impure? Yeah, totally runs against the whole purpose of the mikveh. Okay, whatever. That's interesting, but it doesn't really explain the case of the wife. But there may be some other things here. So let's see. Just I'm scrolling. I'm scrolling here in the Mishnah Berurah. See what else he says here. Hmm. And so here he talks about the monkey also, right? So he seems to say here that the monkey's no good. Okay. We did see it. I think there was a machloket there with Yosef regarding the monkey. Okay, whatever. Anyway, but he doesn't really talk about the woman. I'm sorry, he doesn't talk about the wife. So what else we got here? So let me just remember what we did yesterday. Yeah, yesterday we talked about the barrel. Okay, so that was Yud Aleph. And then we got Yud Bet. Right. So Yud Bet is talking about the monkey. There you go, right? We got to the monkey. So it says Yud Bet, Imakov, right? Noten Maim Yadayim, Yesh Postim, Vesh Machshin. Some say, he brings a machloket here, right? The Shulchan Aruch. Some say it's no good, some say it's good. But the MD says, so he says we paskin like that it's good. So there you go, right? So if you got your chimpanzee ready to go, yes, you can wash your hands from your chimpanzee. All right, see that's the way he paskins. So right, it says in parentheses here, so it seems like there's somebody here, the Rama or somebody, right, who says that you should be stringent. Okay, whatever. But it seems like, basic halacha is that it's allowed to wash from your chimpanzee. Okay, that's good. Good to know. Now we got Yud Gimel and we're done, right? That's it. Right. So it says, it says, interesting, right? You should have intention, when you wash your hands, that you're doing it to eat. So it says this, it also works where, whether it's the guy who's washing his hands or the guy who's pouring the water. So either one works, right? That's the thing, So in other words, Maran is saying like this, interesting, right? He says, lechatchila, you should try to have intention for this. So b'diavad, we're going to rely on the other opinions, right? Who said you don't need it. But lechatchila, try to, be stringent, like the Rashba, right? We respect the Rashba. What can we do, right? We respect him, So he took into account the Rashba here. So, okay, very good. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll stop here. Okay, we got something done today, Baruch Hashem. So, Bezrat Hashem, thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Laila Tov, Chazak Baruch. We'll see you tomorrow, Bezrat Hashem. Pray for our valiant soldiers. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a war going on. It's major, heavy-duty stuff. So we got to say our prayers, Bezrat Hashem. Avinu Malkeinu, whatever it is you're praying, right? So God willing, Bezrat Hashem, we'll see you tomorrow. Laila Tov. All the best.
Kavod Tov. Thank you so much.
God bless.